Let us transform the following LPP problem into the form where all constraints are of equality type. Now, equality type means it is in standard form. So now here what is given? The question is maximize set is equal to this 2x1 plus x2 plus minus 5x3 plus 3x4. Subject to the constraint 3x1 plus 2x2 less or equal to 15, 4x1 plus 5x2 greater or equal to 20, x1 plus x2 minus x3 plus 2x4 is equal to 10. The fourth one is 2 is less equal to 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3, which is less equal to 30. Now this one, see, it is greater equal to but less equal to 30. So you can write this one expression 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x2 greater or equal to 2, and another one is less equal to 30. And we have to identify the variables introduced in this case. Now since the inequality in the constraint has to be equal sign, so therefore I have, for the first one, since it's less or equal to 15, then in this case I have to introduce a slack variable, say x, since we have x1, x2, x3 variables here, or up to x4. So I will introduce the slack variable x5, and for this one, since it is greater or equal to 20, in this case I have to introduce the surplus variable x6, and then the third one will remain the same as it is because it is already equal to 10. And for the third one, or for the fourth one, since 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3 is greater or equal to 2, then in this case I have to introduce the surplus variable x7, and for the fifth one will be, since it is less equal to 30, then in this case I have to introduce the slack variable x8. So here you see that the given question can be expressed as maximize set is equal to 2x1 plus x2 minus 5x3 plus 3x4. Subject to the constraint 3x1 plus 2x2 less or equal to 15, 4x1 plus 5x2 greater or equal to 20, x1 plus x2 minus x3 plus 2x4 equal to 10, and then this one can be written as 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3, it is greater or equal to 2, and the last one will be the same equation 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3, but it's given to be less or equal to 30. So there are 5 constraints in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now since here it is less than or equal, to convert it to equal sign, I need to introduce a slack variable. So for this one, for the first one and the last one, I need to introduce the slack variables. For the first and fifth constraint, since it is of less than or equal sign, so we introduce the slack variables x5 and x6 respectively. Okay, and then for the second one and the fourth one, since it is greater or equal to, here also greater or equal to, we have to introduce the surplus variables. And for the second and fourth constraint, we introduce the surplus variable. Therefore, the standard form of the given LPP is given by maximize set is equal to 2x1 plus x2 minus 5x3 plus 3x4. Now, how many variables did I introduce in this case? There are constrain the surplus variable. Say the surplus variable in this case will be x6 and x7. So in this case, it will be you have to add all these slack and surplus variables, also include them in the maximize in the objective function. So you have to multiply by 0. 0 into x5, sorry, this one is x7 and x8. 0 into x5 plus 0 into x6 plus 0 into x7 plus 0 into x8. So the objective function of the standard LPP now become maximized set is equal to 2x1 plus x2 minus 5x3 plus 3x4 plus 0 time of x5 plus 0 time of x6 plus 0 into x7 plus 0 into x8, where x5 and x6 are the slack variables, x7 and x8 are the surplus variables for the second and the fourth constraint. Now, what will be the constraint now? Subject to the constraint, the first constraint will become what? Now, because when I introduce the slack variables, that means I have to add that x5 to this one, since it is less than or equal. So, it will be 3x1 plus 2x2 plus x5. This will be equal to 15. And the second constraint now, the second constraint here, I introduce the surplus variable x7. So, in that case, the second constraint will become 4x1 plus 5x2. I have to subtract that surplus variable in order that greater or equal will become equal. So, it will be minus x7 is equal to 20. The third constraint will remain as it is, since it is already equal of equal type. So, it will be x1 plus x2 minus x3 plus 2x4 equal to 0. Now, the fourth constraint is again here greater or equal. So, in this case, we introduce the surplus variable x8. So, it will become 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3. Now, again, it is a surplus variable. So, it will be minus x8 equal to 0. And the last one is 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3 less or equal to 30. So, in this case, less or equal, I introduce the slack variable x6. So, you have to add that x6 to that last equation, so that it will become 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3. This one is equal to, it will become plus x6 is equal to, I think I made mistake in this one. It should be this one is 2 and this one is 30. Okay, so you see that the standard form of the given LPP now become maximized set is called 2x1 plus x2 minus 5x3 plus 3x4 plus 0 into x5 plus 0 into x6 plus 0 into x7 plus 0 into x8, subject to the constraint. The first constraint, it becomes 3x1 plus 2x2 plus x5 equal to 15. The second constraint is 4x1 plus 5x2 minus x7 is equal to 20. The third one is x1 plus x2 minus x3 plus 2x4 is equal to 0. 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3 minus x8 is equal to 2. And the last one is 2x1 plus 4x2 minus 2x3 plus x6 is equal to 30. So, you see that in the standard form, all the inequalities in the constraint should be equal sign, where x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, x6, x7, x8 are all greater or equal to 0. They are all greater or equal to 0. Now, the second part of the question is you have to identify the variables introduced. Now, what are the new variables that we introduce in this given LPP in order to convert it into the standard form? The first variable is this one, x5, x6. These are the variables that you have introduced, which are called the slack variables. And then another variables that you introduce are the surplus variables. x7 and x8 are the surplus variable. So the variables that you introduce for this given LPP in order that it becomes in order to convert it into standard form will be this one, x5, x6, x7 and x8. So always note down that for the standard form, If the inequality sign in the constraint is less or of equal type, then in that case you have to introduce the slack variables. That means you have to add a new variable so that it will become equal to whatever be the number on the right hand side. And if it is greater or equal, like in the second one, since this inequation, since the left hand side is greater or equal to this, that means you have to subtract one variable in order that it will become 20. So for that one, you have to introduce the surplus variable, where you need to subtract that variable from this one, 4x1 plus 5x2, in order that it will become equal to 20. Hope now it's clear that how to convert the given LPP into standard form.